Smile more, girl, or you'll never get a real job, Carlos Mendez snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut through the clinking glasses and murmured conversations of Miami's elite gathered inside Azure. The words hung in the air, heavy and humiliating, landing harder than any insult Amara Jackson had heard that night. He didn't lower his voice, didn't hide his disdain, and the nearby patrons chuckled as if her dignity were a punchline. That's the moment where the story begins. And before I take you further, I want to ask you, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a like. These stories matter, and your voice helps them be heard. Now let me take you inside Azure, where one woman's life changed forever. Amara Jackson stood with her tray balanced steady in her hands, her back straight, her eyes fixed on the polished marble floor. She was 32, but the calm in her movements carried the weight of someone who had lived twice as long. A former Marine Corps sniper, she had seen war zones where seconds meant survival. Yet tonight, working as a waitress, she endured a battlefield of a different kind: mockery, prejudice, and invisible lines drawn by wealth. Nathaniel Brooks, a venture capitalist with a reputation for arrogance, sat at table 6. He leaned toward Isabella Crane, the political lobbyist at his side, and sneered just loud enough for Amara to hear. Imagine serving food for the rest of your life. Limited prospects, limited people. The words stung, not because they were new, but because they were so predictable. Isabella laughed, tapping her manicured nails against her wine glass, eyes sliding over Amara as if she were a shadow rather than a person. Julian Navarro sat at the corner table, dining alone, his plate untouched. A billionaire in his late 30s, Cuban-American, sharp suit yet quieter than the room around him. His eyes followed Amara, not with pity, but with a kind of focus. He noticed her posture, the way her hands never trembled, the way she swallowed every insult without breaking. For Julian, who lived in a world where strength was currency, Amara stood out. She didn't know it yet, but her every move was being measured, not as a waitress, but as something more. Carlos returned with another jab, whispering near her ear, "Keep your head down, don't cause trouble, or you're done here." Amara nodded, not for his comfort, but to avoid giving him the satisfaction of seeing her anger. Her paycheck wasn't much, but it paid rent. Liberty City didn't forgive missed bills. She knew survival, and survival meant patience. But patience snapped when the front doors of Azure burst open. 5 men stormed in, masks over their faces, guns raised high. The room turned to chaos. Wine glasses toppled, screams cut through the air, and people who mocked Amara seconds before now dove under tables. Malik Hayes, specter to the streets, stood at the center, his voice echoing through the luxury restaurant. "Everybody down. Phones on the floor, wallets out, now." His men fanned out, shoving their weapons in faces, pushing frightened patrons to the ground. The smell of fear mixed with the salt of the nearby ocean, the illusion of wealth shattering in an instant. Amara froze for only a breath, then the Marine in her rose like muscle memory. A tray became her shield. She slammed it into the wrist of a gunman aiming too close, the weapon clattering across the floor. Another rushed her, but she pivoted, knife from her apron flashing into his arm, dropping him with a cry. A third lunged, and she swept his legs from under him, pinning him down with force that startled even herself. Gasps rose around the room, not of gratitude, but disbelief. The black waitress they laughed at was fighting for their lives while they cowered. Malik's eyes locked on hers. Recognition froze him mid-command. Liberty City wasn't big enough to forget childhood ties. He lowered his weapon for a moment, voice breaking through the noise. "Amara, you shouldn't be here." She glared back, breath sharp, her hands still steady. Malik hesitated, then shouted to his crew, "Move." They fled through the doors as quickly as they had come, leaving 2 of their own writhing on the floor. Before slipping out, Malik's voice cut close to her ear, low and urgent. "They're watching you. Be careful." Then he was gone. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the trembling sobs of patrons climbing back to their seats. Nathaniel Brooks wiped sweat from his forehead, then spat his venom. "You endangered everyone in this room. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Isabella shook her head, muttering, "Typical." Their eyes burned with contempt, not thanks. For them, Amara was still the waitress, not the savior. Carlos rushed forward, his face red, his words worse than the robbery. "You're finished, Amara. Fired. Get your things and leave. You put every guest at risk with your little stunt." He didn't care that her hands had saved lives. He cared only that she had disrupted his fragile order. Julian Navarro stood, slow and deliberate, his gaze fixed on Amara. The billionaire who had sat quietly until now spoke with calm authority. She didn't endanger anyone. She protected them. His voice silenced the room. But Carlos waved him off, muttering excuses about liability and rules. Amara stood straight, her pride intact though her job was gone. For her, survival meant more than employment, it meant living with honor. She turned to walk away, tray still in her hand, when Julian stepped closer. His words were soft but carried weight that shook her world. "Miss Jackson, I could use someone like you. Navarro Tech has enemies. I need someone who doesn't flinch under fire." Amara blinked, stunned. She had gone from insult to offer in the span of minutes. Around them, the patrons whispered, their disbelief feeding the tension. But Julian wasn't offering out of pity. He had seen something no one else dared acknowledge, courage that couldn't be trained, composure that couldn't be bought. As Amara left the restaurant that night, her job stripped from her, she carried more than the bitterness of betrayal. She carried Tiana Brooks's secret recording, footage of the robbery from behind the bar. Tiana pressed the phone into her palm with a whisper. "The world needs to see this. You saved lives, Amara." That recording would prove her truth, but it would also paint a target on her back. Malik's warning echoed in her ears. "They're watching you." And she knew, her life had just stepped into fire. At Navarro Tech Tower, the following morning, Amara Jackson walked into a world of glass, steel, and suspicion, the 50-story skyscraper gleaming under the Miami sun, but inside it felt colder than any battlefield she had known, and her first meeting was with Sofia Delgado, the retiring security director, a woman with eyes sharp from decades of CIA service who wasted no time pulling her into the storm, laying out evidence of a recent cyber attack that had stolen AI defense prototypes valued at $12 billion, not just numbers on a screen but weapons that could destabilize nations, and as Sofia spoke, Amara's instincts sharpened, noticing details others missed, a physical breach in Julian's private penthouse, surveillance footage cut clean, encrypted files accessed without trace, too precise to be coincidence, too dangerous to ignore, and it was clear this wasn't just about technology, it was about power, greed, and the kind of conspiracy that could erase a man like Julian Navarro and anyone loyal to him. So when Julian entered, his calm demeanor masking the pressure of enemies circling, he confirmed what Amara already felt, someone close was selling them out. That evening she went to Miami-Dade jail, where Malik Hayes, the man she had faced at Azure, sat behind glass, and their conversation shifted the ground beneath her feet, because Malik, though branded a criminal, revealed truths no one else dared whisper, that Carlos Mendez, the manager who had humiliated her, had been paid $5 million to arrange Julian's death, not by chance but orchestrated by Nathaniel Brooks, who wanted Navarro Tech's stock to crumble and its secrets stolen, and Malik admitted he took the job but couldn't pull the trigger on Julian, not after remembering how Amara once saved his younger brother from a gang beating years ago in Liberty City, a debt he couldn't betray, and before guards dragged him back, he warned her again, "Nathaniel won't stop. Isabella Crane is already moving pieces in Washington." Back at Navarro Tech, Tiana Brooks, her bartender friend now risking her own life, hacked Carlos's email and uncovered payments from a shell company, the digital trail leading back to Nathaniel, and though the evidence was damning, Amara knew it was only the surface, because betrayal was already crawling inside Navarro Tech's walls, and Rafael Ortiz, a disgruntled engineer with simmering hatred for Julian, had begun sabotaging servers, his silent vendetta putting all of them at risk. The first sign came when Amara noticed logs deleted from the system, an access card swiped at hours Rafael claimed he was home, and then one night, alarms blared as an encrypted file nearly slipped out of their networks, forcing Amara to physically shut down a server before the virus could spread, and though she saved the data, suspicion spread like fire through the team, especially toward Lila Chen, Julian's assistant, who suddenly appeared less trustworthy with every passing day, her encrypted calls to unlisted numbers, her quick fingers deleting digital traces, her late-night meetings unexplained, and Julian, torn between loyalty and doubt, leaned on Amara to make the call. Was Lila a traitor or just a pawn? Amara watched her carefully, testing her reactions, laying subtle traps in conversations, and the tension grew heavier, because every whisper, every glance, could be betrayal, and then it came, a phone call that pierced through the night as Amara left Navarro Tech Tower, her steps echoing on the downtown pavement, her voice steady when she answered, but the words that followed froze her spine. Leave Navarro, or you're dead. The caller hung up, no trace, but the message was clear, the net was tightening, and the deeper she dug, the closer she came to danger, yet Amara didn't flinch, because fear was a luxury she had buried long ago. The next morning, she returned to Navarro Tech, standing tall, her presence in the boardroom now undeniable, her voice calm but firm as she laid out the pieces, Nathaniel's payments, Isabella's bribes, Carlos's betrayal, Rafael's sabotage, and Lila's shadowy behavior, and while Julian listened, Sophia leaned back with an approving nod, recognizing the fire in Amara's analysis, the kind of fire leaders carried. Not servants, but as the room fell silent, the truth settled in heavy, the conspiracy wasn't just about stolen files, it was about erasing Julian, dismantling Navarro Tech, and silencing anyone who stood in the way. Outside the skyscraper, the city hummed with its usual rhythm, tourists sipping cocktails, yachts cutting across the water, but for Amara, the world had shifted, and Liberty City felt closer than ever, because survival was again at stake, only this time it wasn't just hers, it was Julian's, it was Navarro Tech's, it was the fragile hope of stopping men like Nathaniel Brooks from selling justice to the highest bidder. And as Amara stood by the glass window looking down at the streets of Miami, she knew the fight was only beginning, that Malik's warning was no empty threat, and that the next move would decide whether she remained a former waitress trying to survive or became the soldier once more, stepping into a war that reached far beyond her imagination. The safe house in Liberty City smelled faintly of old wood and resilience, a place of worn furniture and guarded windows where Amara Jackson, Julian Navarro, and Sofia Delgado regrouped after the drone strike that ripped through Navarro Tech's garage, a $3 million explosive meant to erase them all in a ball of fire, yet instead only served as proof that the conspiracy was not finished, it was escalating. And in that modest home surrounded by neighbors who knew struggle, Amara sharpened her focus, testing every ally, every assumption, because she knew the next betrayal could come from within. So when Lila Chen walked through the door with coffee and soft apologies, Amara watched her closely, deciding to plant a false lead, a whispered plan that Julian would be hiding in Coral Gables, and then she waited, watching as hours later an encrypted call left Lila's phone, tracing it not to Coral Gables but to Port Miami, where shipping containers rose like steel giants against the night sky, and when Amara and Sophia followed the trail, they found Lila bound inside a container, her face bruised, her voice shaking as she confessed that Isabella Crane had threatened her family, forcing her into silence, and in that moment Amara realized that the real traitors were still out there moving freely, pulling strings, and Port Miami was no longer just a dock, it was a battlefield waiting to happen. The plan took shape quickly, Amara coordinating with Sophia and Detective Elena Ruiz to set a trap, spreading rumors of a Navarro Tech shipment passing through the docks, bait for Nathaniel Brooks and Isabella Crane, who could not resist the chance to seize what they believed was Julian's final defense, and under the humid Miami night, cranes looming above and containers forming a maze, Amara took her place in the shadows, her marine instincts guiding every step, every breath, until headlights cut across the dock and black SUVs rolled in, disgorging armed men led by Victor Kane, a mercenary whose scarred face carried the weight of 100 battles sold to the highest bidder. Nathaniel emerged in his tailored suit, arrogance untouched by the setting, while Isabella's sharp eyes scanned the scene, and they offered Amara the kind of deal that revealed just how desperate they were. $20 million to step aside, to let Julian fall, to trade honor for wealth, but Amara only tightened her grip on the knife at her side, her voice calm yet cutting as she told them no, and then chaos erupted, Victor lunging first, his blade flashing in the dock lights, their fight brutal, primal. Amara's body slammed against steel, blood running down her arm, yet her resolve never breaking. Every strike a reminder of who she once was and who she had become. Around her, shots rang out, Sophia's gunfire precise, Elena's officers moving in to secure the perimeter, but the battle felt endless until finally Amara wrenched Victor's own weapon from him, pressing it to his throat, forcing him down, and the mercenaries' roar turned into silence, his defeat sealing the night. Nathaniel and Isabella tried to flee, but Ruiz's officers cut them off, handcuffs snapping shut, their faces twisted not with fear but with rage, Nathaniel sneering that this was bigger than them, that, a higher power, would never let Navarro Tech survive, his words chilling even as he was dragged away, while Isabella spat venom about Washington connections and foreign buyers, her voice carrying threats that made clear the war wasn't over. Amid the arrests, Amara staggered, her side bleeding, yet she stood tall, refusing to let pain bend her, because she knew weakness was exactly what her enemies wanted, and as she leaned against the steel wall of a container, Sophia clasped her shoulder with rare respect, saying only, "You've done more in weeks than some of us did in years," words that sank into Amara like an oath. But even as the dock fell quiet, another storm brewed, because Rafael Ortiz, hidden in the bowels of Navarro Tech's systems, unleashed a virus designed to cripple the company's AI, lines of malicious code spreading like wildfire across servers, threatening to crash the very foundation of Julian's empire, and Amara, though wounded, rushed back to Navarro Tech to help contain the breach, her mind as sharp as any blade, guiding Tiana Brooks through counterhacks, tracing Rafael's digital footprints. Their teamwork frantic yet effective, pulling the system back from the brink at the last possible moment. Still, the damage was clear, they were fighting enemies on every front, and trust was now their rarest weapon. As dawn crept over Miami, painting the docks in pale light and casting long shadows through Navarro Tech Tower, Amara sat with Julian, her body aching but her spirit unbroken, and he looked at her not as an employee but as an equal, his voice soft yet filled with steel when he said, "You saved me. You saved this company, but they'll come again, harder, louder, and you have to be ready," and she nodded, because she had always been ready, because this was no longer about a job, it was about survival, about justice, about showing the world that a woman they dismissed as a waitress could stare down millionaires, mercenaries, and conspirators, and still stand taller than them all. The morning after the dock confrontation, Miami still buzzed with whispers of explosions and arrests, yet inside Navarro Tech Tower the air grew heavier, because Amara Jackson now knew that Nathaniel Brooks and Isabella Crane were only pieces of a larger machine, and the true puppet master was hidden deeper in Washington's corridors of power. So when Tiana Brooks cracked Isabella's encrypted files and revealed transactions linking her to Senator Claire Donovan, a Pentagon insider who had funneled $8 million in bribes to kill defense contracts and blame Navarro Tech for treason, Amara understood that the conspiracy reached beyond money, it reached into the heart of national security itself, and this revelation pressed her forward with no room for hesitation. Sofia Delgado, despite her years of service, admitted that Claire Donovan had been untouchable for decades, a shadow player who crushed rivals without leaving fingerprints, but Amara had lived too long in silence to back down now. And when Tiana discovered Donovan's yacht anchored at Port Miami, hosting secret negotiations with foreign buyers, Amara made her choice, gathering Sofia, Julian Navarro, and Detective Elena Ruiz to launch a raid that would either dismantle the conspiracy or end in their graves. The night was thick with humidity, cargo lights reflecting across the water, when Amara and Sofia boarded the yacht under the cover of darkness, their movements precise, weapons drawn, every step echoing Amara's marine past, and then the chaos erupted, guards armed with automatic rifles swarming the deck, bullets tearing through the air. Julian forced into cover while Sofia's veteran aim took down assailants with clinical efficiency, but still the tide pushed against them until Amara surged forward, knife flashing, body moving like a shadow honed by years of training, and in the blood-soaked struggle she caught a bullet in her shoulder, pain tearing through her but never breaking her stance. With her free hand she disarmed a guard, slammed him into the railing, and kept moving, her only thought to reach Donovan before the secrets were sold. Below deck the confrontation boiled into its climax, Claire Donovan herself surrounded by advisors and foreign buyers, her calm composure betraying no fear even as Amara stormed the room, dripping blood yet unshaken, and their eyes locked. One woman who had killed in silence for profit, the other who had killed in war for survival, and Donovan's sneer told the truth. She didn't see Amara as a threat, she saw her as disposable. But Amara's voice cut through like steel, accusing her of orchestrating 53 cyber attacks across the United States, destabilizing companies and risking national security to pad her own accounts, and when Elena Ruiz's officers burst in behind her, guns raised, the web unraveled, Donovan's laptop seized, her phone pulled from her grip, the evidence spilling open for all to see. For the first time the senator's mask cracked, fury twisting her features as she hissed that Amara had no idea how deep the rot went, that the higher power Nathaniel mentioned was real, that she was merely one piece of an empire that would outlive them all, but even her venom couldn't stop the cuffs snapping around her wrists as Ruiz read her rights, her empire collapsing in the glow of flashing lights. Yet the night wasn't finished, because Rafael Ortiz, Navarro Teca's mole, tried to vanish in the chaos, slipping from the yacht with a burner phone and a satchel of stolen drives, but Tiana's code traced him in real time, pinging his location across the docks, and Amara, wounded but relentless, pursued him through the maze of containers, her body screaming with every step, until finally she cornered him, his bitterness spilling out in words sharper than the knife he carried, ranting about how Julian had stolen his ideas, how the company never respected him, how betrayal was the only language Navarro Tech understood, but Amara stood steady, her voice cutting through his rage, telling him the truth he couldn't face, that betrayal defined him, not the company, not Julian, and when Elena's officers closed in. Raphael dropped the blade, fury etched into his face as the cuffs clicked shut, his future sealed with the rest of the conspirators. Back at Navarro Tech, Julian held Amara's hand as medics stitched her wound, his gratitude plain yet his eyes full of something deeper, a recognition that her courage had not only saved his life but had preserved the company he had built, and Sophia, standing nearby, acknowledged Amara as more than a soldier, more than a protector, but as the kind of leader Navarro Tech would need in the storm still to come. Even Lila Chen, cleared of suspicion and freed from Isabella's grip, stood by Amara's side, determined to prove her loyalty, her eyes carrying a new fire, her voice steady as she asked to join Amara's team, and for the first time, Amara let her guard lower, offering a nod that turned mistrust into a fragile alliance. Yet in the quiet that followed, Donovan's words haunted Amara, her warning that this wasn't over ringing truer than any threat, because even as the arrests filled headlines and Navarro Teca's enemies seemed defeated, the shadows of higher powers lingered just out of sight, and Amara knew she had only scratched the surface of a war far greater than she imagined. As dawn broke over Miami, painting the waters of Port Miami gold, Amara stood on the yacht's deck, her wound bandaged, her body aching, but her spirit unbroken, and she whispered to herself that survival was no longer enough, that from now on she would fight not just to survive but to lead, to protect, to prove that courage could stand against corruption, and as the city stirred awake, unaware of the battles waged in its harbors, she realized that her story had only begun to shape a legacy. Written in both blood and resilience. 8 months later, the skyline of Miami glittered as if nothing had ever been touched by blood or betrayal, yet for Amara Jackson every reflection of sunlight on Navarro Tech Tower was a reminder of how far she had come, from waitress to warrior, from discarded server to respected leader, and now as head of Navarro Tech Security she stood beside Julian Navarro, no longer just an employee but his partner in every sense, their engagement ring gleaming on her finger a symbol of both love and transformation, and together they had rebuilt what conspirators tried to destroy, protecting 22 firms across the country, foiling 9 assassination plots, employing 85 former inmates through a program that turned second chances into legacies, Malik Hayes among them, no longer the specter of Liberty City but a youth mentor who spoke to children about choices and redemption. And the city began to see Amara not through the lens of prejudice but as a force reshaping Miami's Future. That night the Miami Beach Convention Center glittered with chandeliers and gowns, a gala where Navarro Tech celebrated survival and honor, and Amara, in an elegant dress that felt strange against her battle-scarred skin, walked into applause that echoed like validation, though what moved her most wasn't the praise of billionaires but the sight of Dr. Miriam Foster, once the patron who dismissed her at Azure, stepping to the stage and pledging $10 million to fund the Liberty City Community Center Amara had dreamed into being, a place already serving 1,200 youths with after-school programs, mentorship, and job training, and when Miriam clasped Amara's hand, her voice trembling as she admitted she had been wrong, Amara felt something rare, vindication without bitterness, forgiveness without weakness. Tiana Brooks stood nearby, now Navarro Tech's cybersecurity lead, her quick mind running the networks that once nearly fell, her friendship with Amara a bond born in danger and solidified in trust, and she smiled proudly as screens around the gala displayed the center's achievements, a 94% employment success rate that gave numbers to hope. Lila Chen, once a shadow of suspicion, now stood as Amara's loyal aide, proving herself in quiet acts of integrity, while Sofia Delgado, retired yet ever watchful, lifted a glass in Amara's direction, her eyes carrying a respect that words could not capture. Even Elena Ruiz, her badge gleaming under the ballroom lights, spoke of how Amara's testimony had dismantled networks of corruption in 9 states, 28 conspirators convicted, Rafael Ortiz awaiting trial, his bitterness now just another file in the justice system. And yet, amid the celebration, Amara's focus remained grounded, because she knew triumph wasn't about chandeliers or applause, it was about Liberty City children playing in safe streets, about Malik teaching them that courage was choice, not circumstance, about mothers who no longer feared their sons would be swallowed by gangs or prisons. Later that evening, as the music softened and Julian drew her aside to the balcony overlooking the ocean, he spoke quietly, his voice filled with both love and awe, telling her that she had not only saved his life but given him a purpose beyond profits, that she had turned Navarro Tech into more than a company, into a shield for justice, and Amara, with a smile rare yet real, whispered that she hadn't done it alone, that every hand lifted her, from Tiana's hacks to Malik's redemption, from Miriam's gift to Julian's belief. The wind carried their words into the night, and for a moment peace felt possible. But peace never lasted, and when Amara returned to her office days later, reviewing files for new recruits, her screen flickered with a cryptic message from an unknown source, a single line that froze her breath: "We are not finished." The words pulsed like a threat and a promise, proof that Donovan's warnings of a higher power were not idle, that shadows still lingered beyond their victories, and Amara closed the laptop slowly, her face calm, because she had learned that fear was a choice she no longer granted her enemies. Instead she rose, walking into the training room where new hires drilled under her guidance, among them a young woman named Jada Miles, bright-eyed and eager, who looked at Amara not as a boss but as a hero, and when Jada asked how she had found the strength to endure so much, Amara answered with the truth that lived in her heart, that strength wasn't about never breaking, it was about standing back up every time the world tried to knock you down. The recruits listened, the room falling silent, and in that silence Amara realized that her greatest legacy wasn't the conspiracies she dismantled or the wealth she had protected, but the lives she now shaped, the generations who would walk freer because she had refused to bow. That evening, Julian joined her at the community center, watching children paint murals of hope on the walls, Malik coaching basketball in the gym, Tiana teaching coding to teenagers who once thought the digital world was closed to them, and Amara felt the weight of her journey transform into light, because this was the Miami she fought for, one where resilience meant more than survival, where redemption was more than a word, it was a living truth. As the sun set over Liberty City, casting gold across streets too often forgotten, Amara held Julian's hand, the sound of laughter rising around them, and she whispered that this was only the beginning, that their fight was not just against conspiracies but for a future where no girl serving tables would be told her life was worthless, where no child would believe they were trapped by circumstance, and as Julian kissed her hand, promising that their wedding would be more than celebration, it would be a symbol of unity, Amara looked out at the horizon and knew that though new threats would come, she had already forged her legacy, a legacy built not on fear but on courage, not on betrayal but on trust, not on exclusion but on inclusion, and in that truth she stood unshakable, a soldier, a leader, a woman who turned every wound into strength and every doubt into proof that one voice, one heart, one act of defiance could change the world forever. Thank you for watching Billionaire's Redemption, a tale of courage and conspiracy. If this story touched you, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing powerful stories to life. A heartfelt thank you to every viewer for your time and encouragement. Your support means everything. Stay tuned for the next story of courage, justice, and hope.